Hello, friends. We are back in New York City, and it feels good. We had Fashion Week last week, and there was no partaking in the Fashion Week events, but the buzz of the city was phenomenal. A lot of friends and acquaintances are in the city for the month of September and October, so it's a fun time to be here and feeling much more grounded, having a routine, being in my space. And I think that was something after this last trip I spoke to last week on Off the Top, but something I'm starting to yearn for more of, just like having the ability to tap into my routine and get work done. I used to take so much away from traveling, and I definitely want to continue that, but there has to be purpose and intention behind it, or else it just feels empty, because it's time that I could be spending with family or building, and those are the two priorities at the moment. I want to kick off with a story that I actually heard this morning catching up with my uncle. He was recounting a time where he was visiting my grandfather, who I called Papa, at his office. And at the time, their family, my grandpa, did not have the money to be giving money out to people. But I guess the hot dog stand outside of my grandfather's office, my uncle went to go buy a hot dog and later found out that my Papa had given this man the money to start his hot dog stand. And again, they had no business at that time, donating money, but lived with this philosophy, and a philosophy that I think a lot of people that I look up to, friends included, that say, when you are in the least opportune situation to be lending a hand, whether it be money, time, resources, but you come from that place, you will always come from that place. And this mindset that, on the contrary, says, maybe I'll donate when I make XYZ, or I'll, give this person my time once I'm through this chapter of life. Like, that just, in my opinion, is not the right way to live. And this was another great example of, living life with an open hand, and that karmic energy comes back around. And so I thought it was a beautiful story and something that resonated deeply, because my grandfather has passed away, but I guess this entrepreneur of a hot dog man now has like 7 or 8 carts around town that other people run, and he's been able to start a thriving business a couple decades later as a result of that kindness. So something I think that's good to have at the forefront of your mind, of like, that generosity carries a lot of weight, but it carries the most weight when it's the hardest to give. And it can be outside of money too. That can be time. That can be as simple as, like, introductions or checking in on friends when you don't necessarily need something. I was asked by a friend, and not the TikTok, like, when confidence is most felt in my life. And my response after thinking about it was like, when I feel confident, it's because I'm representing what I believe to be true essence and coming from my authentic self. When I haven't been confident in the past in a social setting or in some sort of dialogue, it's because I'm wearing a persona or a mask that isn't true to my essence. And funny enough, over time, I think as you begin to get to know yourself better and be comfortable in the skin that you wear, that's when you become the most confident, when you can define whatever it is your unique essence is, and where that persona, that to me is what drives confidence. So anyway, one other thing that I had never said before, but was something that I was able to create distinction between. Been confident when I represent authentic self, been not as confident if I'm wearing a mask or trying to be somebody that I'm not. Challenges for the week. So this is a funny analogy that I'm borrowing. I heard this a long time ago, but it comes from motivation, and it's an analogy about a mouse. If a mouse is running from a cat, it will most likely be running way faster than if it's trying to find food or chasing a piece of cheese, I think was the example. On one extreme, you have a mouse, chasing a piece of cheese that's in front of it. And that is the motivation of, reward and gain. Whereas on the flip side, when a cat is chasing a mouse, it's running out of fear. And that fear can be a motor that is much more intense, but mentally also much more taxing. And so I think the challenge that I'm speaking to is a lot of my motivation comes from this place of fear. Whereas on the flip side of that, thinking about reward and gaining something, getting that cheese, I think is a motivation that I'm trying to tap into a little bit more. Ann Malum said it on the pod, but she frequently through her climb asked herself, what's the upside of whatever I'm doing? And that's something that I don't really think about very much, and can be a very useful motivator in anything you're tackling, whether it be consistency in exercising, a diet, learning an instrument, developing some sort of craft, building a business with friends, like thinking about, what if this actually goes according to our dream? Using that as a motivator, both I think are important. I lean too much on fear, but trying to get back to a healthy place. This is from Dr. John Deloney. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I was listening to him, and he had a great take on just the seasonality of life, and a phrase that he coined or just likes to remind himself of is, I'll give the example that he shared in a relationship, the first couple months. Sometimes people refer to that phase as the honeymoon phase, and it's awesome. But you step in fairly quickly to a new kind of chapter after that, and it can kind of be like this whiplash effect. But what he reminded himself of is it's also awesome. It's just a different kind of awesome. Fast forward a few more years, maybe you introduce kids into the picture, and that old life of, freedom, selfishness, whatever it may be that you got to experience with your partner, the ability to travel all over the world or just have more time with each other, kind of vanishes. But now you have a kid, and it's a different kind of awesome. And I love that perspective because it's this optimistic approach to the seasonality of life, and taking that view of, yeah, it's different. And maybe it's more challenging, but it's a different kind of awesome. To me is a great mentality when comparing life to different stages and looking back on something and being like, hey, for me personally, 2 years ago, I was living a very great and comfortable and stable life. It was awesome. This chapter of climbing down the mountain and being a beginner again at many different things, it's a different kind of awesome. It's challenging, but it's a different kind of awesome. And I'm learning so much more than I was at that given point in my life. And that's a different kind of awesome. So that's a phrase that he shared that I've been thinking a lot about since hearing. Win for this week is, that mindset, tapping into it more. Eyes on. This is one that, oh man, I'm so excited to share about. Craig Maud is an author, writer for some big publications, but also has a few books, one of which just came out. But he lived in Japan for a decent amount of time and has, in the last decade, gone on these walks with another man named Kevin Kelly, who is, I think co-founded Wired. Anyway, they spearheaded these walks that last 7 to 8 days in Japan and other parts of the world, but are typically offline through culturally dense villages in Japan. And every night after, 10 to 25K of walking, they will bathe in warm onsens and have a Jeffersonian style dinner, which is putting forth a topic for people to debate and talking through life's biggest questions. The feedback that I've separately done outside of hearing, feedback that they've shared from guests is that this has been such a unique way of engaging with people and something that has inspired me a ton. Just to, one, gather a group of people that are thinking about the world in a unique way, but also like this dinner topic conversation and having a purpose for the walk to reconnect with yourself, with other people that maybe you don't know at the beginning of the trip, but learn to really appreciate, I think picked up. And I know there's people and guests they've had that, would from the outside look like, holy shit. Like I know Jeff Bezos has been on it, people like Tim Ferriss, but that's not why they do it. Like they just want to engage in good conversation, develop relationships, and selfishly experience these walks and what it does to their headspace. Anyway, walk and talks. I'm adding it as a goal for next year to host a walk and talk. I don't know where yet, but I'm thinking like 6 to 8 guests, maybe in Japan, maybe in another part of the world, and hopefully some interesting things will come out of it. And maybe not, but I do think there will be a rise in these offline experiences where people become sick of this digital age and yearn for experiences that prompt you to detox from the digital age. Extra credit this week comes from Amber Lyon. She was on the podcast a couple months ago, but she just dropped a great piece of advice that I think is really important. I'm going to share the quote. Let's normalize giving advice to others that encourages their own inner wisdom over our idea of what's best for them. I'm going to repeat that. Let's normalize giving advice to others that encourages their own inner wisdom over our idea of what is best for them. So I think part of that is asking questions that help people get to their own answer. And, maybe that's the same answer that you would have given them or advice that you would have given them, but allows them to unlock that for themselves. And there's skill in being able to empower people to that place. A great reminder from Amber. We're sometimes creatures that need to just say things out loud that we already deep down know. But having someone prompt us to find our own inner wisdom, I think is really important. And a lot of times, like, that's where the magic happens. You know, you can do a lot for somebody just by listening. Simon Sinek has this story that has stuck with me, where a friend had texted him one night. He ended up, responding, but was kind of busy at the time. And a couple weeks later, they caught up, and this woman that I've been texting him shared that she was like really, really struggling that given night. I don't know if, she was having like a panic attack or a depressive episode or something similar, but long story short, she was very much so struggling. And he's like, well, why didn't you text me that night? And she's like, well, I did text you. He's like, well, why didn't you make it clear that it was like this important? And she's like, well, I didn't really know that I had to do that. And he's like, well, I would always want you to be comfortable sharing that. And so they came up with what they call the 8-minute rule. I think this has been shared more publicly since, but anytime they need just somebody to talk to, they'll text each other, do you have 8 minutes? And that's just a signal to each other that there's something on my mind and I really need somebody to talk to. So all back to gaining that inner wisdom, mirroring each other, asking the right questions, the art of listening, skill that I myself can work on. But off the top, thank you guys for listening. What a beautiful journey. I am trying to remind myself of these moments of peace and solitude in this chapter, for all the chaos that it's been and all the challenges that I feel like I've had. It's a different kind of awesome. So that's the ep. We'll see you next week.